Today we're going to take you through a way to mobilize your pelvis in 3 dimensions in supine hook line position. In standing, I'm going to show you how to find your ASISs to begin, and then we'll get down onto the mat. So put a little bend into your knees and find the middle of your hip crease. Then you're going to walk your fingers up until you reach some bony landmarks where you can feel kind of a hip point sticking out into your fingers. So we're going to call these your hip points or your ASISs, and that will be the landmark we use when we get down onto the mat. So you've found your ASISs, and you're going to come to lie down. Knees bent, feet flat, head can be supported on a pillow for comfort. Locate those ASISs a second time. Again, find roughly the center of your hip crease, and then move the fingertips up until you find a bony landmark. And you can rest your fingertips on those ASISs. We're going to take a few breaths to settle and soften onto the floor. So every exhale, allow yourself to settle and soften. And then when the body's feeling comfortable and relatively relaxed, we're going to take those ASISs and rock them towards our hips, and then rock them away from our hips. So moving from those ASISs, rocking towards our ribs, and rocking away from ribs. As we rock away from ribs, you'll feel the low back lift away and arch. So just doing that a few times, rocking those hip points away and feeling that low back lift away from the mat and arch. You're continuing to rock in both directions. And then you're going to start to sense what happens when those hip points come towards the ribs. You'll feel that low back flatten. So when the hip points come towards the ribs, the low back flattens into the mat. You can see if you can toggle back and forth between these two, allowing the low back to arch, hip points away from ribs, the low back to flatten, hip points towards ribs. You're going to move with as much ease as possible, and there's very little, if any, gripping and bracing. Next, you're going to settle your pelvis in between those two end ranges, commonly what we call neutral. So the hip points are halfway in between towards the ribs and away from the ribs. There's a small arch in your low back. Next movement is a lateral flexion of the pelvis. We're still going to move from the hip point. We're going to bring our right hip point up towards our armpit, and then we're going to bring our left hip point up towards our armpit. So it's a relatively small shift. I'm going to leave my hands on my ribs so that you can maybe see the change of shape in my waistline. And whichever hip point is being pulled up towards the armpit, ideally you feel that waistline shortening. Whichever hip point is being pulled up towards the armpit, you'll feel that hip hiking. So that's what's happening on the ASIS towards armpit side, but we can also pay attention to the ASIS away from armpit side. So when that right ASIS ASIS reaches away from the armpit, you'll feel that waistline lengthening. And then when the left hip point reaches away from the armpit, you'll feel that left waistline lengthening. So toggle back and forth, and you're as easy as possible through neck, chest, shoulders, and you're gently watching as one hip point moves up towards the head, the other one goes down towards the foot, and then you switch, and you switch. So with as much ease as possible, and just allowing one side of the pelvis really to move up, the other side moves down, and then that switches. You might notice that whichever hip point is moving down towards the foot, that knee is also moving towards the wall at your foot. So you'll see there's a slight shift of my knees on the hip unhiking side. That knee is reaching slightly closer to the wall at my feet. You're going to pause, and we're going to go into our third and final motion of the pelvis, rotation. So imagine tying a puppet string to each hip point, and you're going to gently pull the hip string on the left hip point to the ceiling, and then pull the puppet string on the right hip point to the ceiling. So whichever hip point is being pulled to the ceiling, that hip point is lifting, that glute is becoming unweighted from the floor. So while one hip point is going to the front of the body, the opposite hip point is going to the back of the body. And hence we're creating a rotation in the pelvis, essentially turning the pelvis towards the hip point that's moving to the back of the body. So just see if you can observe for a few repetitions that the pelvis is indeed turning side to side and rotating. Another piece of the puzzle that can be helpful is on the hip moving to the front of the body side, that knee shifts towards the wall at your feet. So allow that little scissor slide of the knees to happen in rotation. You're not forcing it to occur, but you're allowing the knee on the hip lifting side, or the ASIS to the sky side, to reach towards the wall at your feet. Again, doing these with as much ease as you can find. And just allowing those hips to gently turn from side to side. Let that pelvis settle, and when you're ready, come on up to stand. You can have a little check-in, a little walk about your space, and see if that pelvis is moving with more freedom, more ease.